All right. Today we're gonna start with a fun one, or at least I think it's fun, because I don't know why, but this thought just kind of occurred to me. I don't know what I was doing, but I just thought about like the fact that like mothers produce milk for their, offspring, right? And I was just like thinking about this, and I was just like, how does how does that happen? Like, how does that evolve, right? And so I was curious, and so I looked it up, and I'm like, what's the origin of like lactation? Like, where does that come from? And so I think, from what I gathered, the current theory is, I don't know if you can really prove this because it's based off of genetic. I don't know. Maybe you can. Maybe this has been like definitively proven because we found species that still use this method. I don't know. I didn't do that much of a deep dive, but I pretty much I did a quick search. I'm gonna be honest. I did a quick search. It gave me an answer that made sense to me, and from there I could piece the rest together, and that's what I did. So I really, to be honest, what I say here could be wrong. But for me, it's not about being right. It's just about thinking. Um, and so, um, basically, I was thinking about this, like, how does lactation, come about, right? And by thinking about this process, I have also answered the question of why men have nipples. And I don't know if this was any question that anyone was really curious about, but I feel like this is like a joke that I've heard before where people are like, why do guys have nipples, right? Because they're basically pointless for men, right? Because we don't lactate, right? And so the question is, why do men have nipples? And this is the conclusion that I came to, right? Is that um, what my research, came back with basically is that um, some species must have developed a mutation at some point where they excreted nutrients. You know, maybe, I don't know if it would have been sweat, but it would be similar to sweat, right? Like the way we sweat is probably also the fact that humans sweat is also very unique to us. And I feel like it might be a side tangent to this same process, right? And so it would be like, imagine you sweat, right? But when you sweat, I mean, there is some nutrients in that sweat, like the salt and things like that. And so if you have little babies, right, and you're sweating, your babies might, lick you. And because they lick you, they get the nutrients you're excreting. And the babies that lick the nutrients off of you do better because they have more nutrients. And so they survive better, right? And so because of that, your babies um, have a higher chance of survival, and so they do, right? And then their babies have a higher chance of survival because they have this trait, right, where they can lick sweat or whatever. Like, would it actually be sweat? I don't know, right? Like, whatever this was, right? But let's lick the sweat off of you, right? And then because this is now becoming a thing, then it opens up the door to so many more options, right? Because now, um, the sweat that's more nutrient rich has a favorability, right? But there's also a selection for, this optimization of when to sweat, right? Because now, um, it's more favorable to sweat more when you're having children, right? And this is why lactation is not necessarily a constant thing. It happens after you have a baby because that's an evolutionary process that has been built into the genetic code. It's like, oh, okay, I had a baby. Now I'm going to excrete resources because excreting resources when you don't have a baby is a waste, right? And so the ones that conserve the resources for when they were needed, that got optimized, right? And then more higher nutrients excretion also was optimized because that benefited the babies, right? And so there was this optimization thing, right? And so what also happens is that you go from sweating all over your body, right? But then you want to optimize that, right? So you don't want to sweat everywhere in your body because that's waste, right? your babies aren't going to lick every part of your body. So over time, the concentration of where the sweat was excreted from was selected, right? Because the less waste, the better, right? The more optimal for survival, and the easier it is for the babies to get the most nutrients, right? So by excreting the nutrients that would have been for your whole body on a smaller portion, they get more nutrients faster and more efficiently, right? And so that becomes optimized until it comes down to a little point, right? And that is the nipple. And so, because our bodies optimized for this single point of, well, actually, it's really not a single point, but this point of contact, right? And the reason why it's not one point is because, redundancy is probably been built into the code, right? If you had a single nipple and something happens, then, now you got no nipples, right? So there's like a saying, one is none, two is one. And so I think that's why, humans typically only have one baby. So having two nipples is probably optimal. Having more than that is excessive redundancy that has been factored out for us. Whereas there's animals that have more than one baby at a time, right? And so they tend to have more nipples, right? And so because of that reason, that's kind of how that evolved, right? And so I find this fascinating because the human species is, we have the male and female, but we are using relatively the same genetic code. And so because the refining of the excretion point is not necessarily gender specific, it's just part of the code. Even though I'm a male, I still have nipples because nipples are not specific to females. Their function is more specific to females, but it is not actually a female thing. It's just a part of being a human, because selecting specifically for only women to have this, like, that would be just interesting. But like, I don't know how that would even really work, right? Because that's like, I don't know. I guess like the only thing that we really differ on is, like, the main things we differ on is sexual organs, right? And then everything else is selection based off of attraction preference, right? Women having more curvy features, I don't think is like, you can just see this based off of the variety in body shapes. Not everyone has the same body shape, because the shape of your body is not defined by being human. And so, having excessive curves and things along those lines is just something that's been selected for more on an attractive level, right? And so different cultures value different things. And so it's not just, curvy features that are this preference. There's other features, like hair color or skin color, things like these, that are selected for. And so that's why I think there's as much of a difference as there is between male and female. But getting back to the nipples, there's not as much difference there, because that's actually, like, that's not like a sexually selected thing. That's just a part of genetic evolution, right? I don't think that anyone looks at I don't know. Like, in theory, at some point, maybe nipples were a selective selection thing. But like, humans have been most likely covering themselves and wearing clothing for a long time, and so it's kind of hard to select based off of that when you don't know what it looks like. And until you're at that level, right? And so I don't know. I I just thought that that was kind of interesting to think about, and it just goes to show that there's certain things where it's like, how could that ever possibly happen, you know? And it's just this sort of thing that snowballs into um, something you never would have expected it to be, right? It's like, how does that work? You know, how did they figure that out? And it's just something that happens on accident, right? And then over time, it's refined into something a lot more efficient, right? Like the discovery of fire and things along those lines, like tool making, like most likely the way that a lot of things like that most likely got discovered, like what's edible and what's not, is it's by accident, right? It's like, oh, you know, blending these two together makes this edible, and it's just by accident. And then after that, you know, experimentation helps refine that process and make it into something more. So things like certain you know uh, like ancient remedies and medicinal practices and stuff, that was most likely discovered through accident and experimentation after the fact. It was like, oh, well, you know, I ate this and then I felt better. Huh. Well, you know, let's see if that continues to be the case, right? Like, let's keep experimenting with that. And over time, this knowledge is just something that, you know, the culture would keep and be like, all right, you got a tummy ache, eat this, right? You know, you got a toothache, eat this. You know, you got a headache, you know, take this. And so it's just kind of this process that it evolved over time. And so it's not just, you know, genetics that kind of evolves in this weird way that you'd be like, how did that even happen, right? But it's just like human advancement and things like just like technology and so many other things evolve in a very similar way, where it's like, how does that even happen, right? Like, we don't look at technology in this kind of evolutionary way, I feel like, most of the time, but there's a lot of overlap in those areas where it's just like, it just kind of happened one time and it was better, right? And so we continue to improve that. Um, and so, yeah, I don't know. I think that's all I got for that one. But peace out.